Welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I don't know what day it is. Up next with Dr. Carpenter. What up?
What's happening? What's happening, man? I'm like super excited to be on here tonight. Let's go.
Thanks for being my guest. This is super dope. It's a lot to talk about. We got a lot to unpack. But we're here. What day of quarantine we in?
Man, I don't know the day, and like everybody else, I'm getting a little bit of cabin fever, but more importantly, I want to be safe, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to be safe. And I sat it back and I watched our mayor, man, ups to Quentin Lucas, man, Mayor Lucas, standing there, fight the good fight, man. People over economics. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, man. He's been saying some good things. And today his press conference was really good. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but
I did.
I was like, man, we lucky, man. We're so lucky to have him in Kansas City. And obviously the pressure, I guess, it shows up now.
Yeah.
In times of craziness. And so he's doing a good job. But we got a lot to unpack. So the title of this discussion tonight is Insights in Equity. It is so much stuff that we could talk about. So we're going to have to break this down. But coronavirus has literally exposed everything. Some stuff we already knew we needed to fix, right. Not only as a community, locally, nationally, all across the globe. We're just starting and kicking us off. What are your thoughts? What are some things that stands out? And then we can kind of talk about education and then kind of move into some other areas.
So coronavirus, man, approaching 60,000 deaths, I guess. Very
a million.
Yeah, thinking about here in the U.S., over 1 million cases, nearing 60,000 deaths. And what I just want to say is to the families who lost loved ones, man, keep your head up, be strong. This is such a unique time, Kiona, because oftentimes when we lose our family, man, especially as Black folks, we tend to be communal in nature, right? So we want to together, we want to socialize, and we don't leave our ill neighbors in the hospital. We don't leave our ill family members in the hospital, and COVID has required us to do that. So as we work through this, and at some point we'll get to the other side. And when we get to that other side, I'm thinking about an African word that's Sankofa. Sankofa. And Sankofa means it's all right to go back and get that which was lost along the way. So what I'm going to encourage all of us to begin thinking about right now is everyone we lost who didn't get the farewell that they deserve. Then when we get on the other side of this, Sankofa, go back and retrieve that and get that right. So man, mad love to everybody. And I just hope everyone's staying safe.
What are your take, as it relates to primarily here in Kansas City or just educators across the globe? One huge thing was, in school districts, teachers, now they're having to structure their learning curriculum, day-to-day schedules with their kids, seeing them every day to now we're at home. With that entails kids that have different needs, different backgrounds, and now we're supposed to just have parents teach students, and we know that all students don't come from privilege and have the means to have two parents or maybe a single mom who's working two jobs. Or what is going on? Did we think about that? Like, what did we miss? I'm missing some stuff that I probably didn't mention, but that's a lot. There's a lot of gaps.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you enter into that education space and that space of teachers. So the first thing that I want to unpack is just this entire notion of the New York Department of Education and Chancellor, the term we use here locally, superintendent, but Chancellor Carranza, who's a friend of mine. And they've lost 68 staff members in New York to coronavirus, 28 of which are teachers. So before we unpack what's going on and what teachers are doing, I just want to stop and honor 68 staff members in New York as of a couple of days ago. 28 teachers were lost. And one of the most notable was yesterday. And that was Ronna Mungan, 30-year-old Black female, went to the doctor twice So we're going to get the students in equity. But she went to the doctor twice to try to get a test. And she was denied a test. An American hero, a teacher, twice denied a test. And in this last month, she had a battle that ultimately ended in her death a day or so ago. So I'm thinking about all of the educators in New York and New York City. So man, Corona schooling, you know, people say homeschooling. This is not homeschooling, this is Corona schooling. And Corona schooling is different than homeschooling. In homeschooling, a parent has carved out the time to be with their child to do this thing that we call school. In this age of Corona, that same parent is trying to juggle work.
Yeah.
You're an essential employee, and hopefully we'll get to the inequities associated with essential employees at some conversation. Or it's one of us that's a privileged parent that gets to utilize Zoom all day and get on Zoom calls, and still they're trying to juggle this notion of teaching our children. So when I think about my children, when I think about a little gifted boy and a little girl that was on her way to gifted testing prior to the school year ending untimely, it's difficult for us to keep up.
Yeah.
With mom and dad, doctorate degrees at home, it's difficult for us to keep up and juggle those other things that are super important for us to keep the lights on. So this is a difficult lift. And even as kids go back, I want every parent to know, as an educator and as a parent, your child should never be viewed through a deficit lens based on what he or she did not do or get during this particular season. They should never be viewed through a deficit lens, because we're not going to have a student issue around what they did or did not get in the spring, come fall, if we're fortunate enough to resume regular school. What we're going to have is a curriculum gap. There's going to be a gap of 3 months of instruction that kids just did not get. You know, I'm in a school district where our kids have the entire week to get their work done. And as long as it's done, I guess, by Friday. So you tell me a kindergartner, a first grader, or a second grader, third, or even a 12th grader who's mastered time management, that student does not exist. So if a parent is an essential employee, or if a parent is trying to COVID teach and do their Zoom calls, even the best students will go back with gaps. So one thing that I've thought through as I've thought about educators and what they're doing or what they're not doing during this time is, why don't we utilize this time to get better at schooling? And why don't we use this time as classroom teachers to think about those 4 or 5 students, the 4 or 5 students in our classroom that have the greatest challenges or that we've had the hardest time building relationship with? Why don't we invest more time there and start bridging gaps? And then just honor the fact that when we come back in the fall, across every grade level, there will be a gap. And we can start doing some curriculum mapping right now, so that that 7th grader who's going to 8th grade, let's just honor the fact that they missed 3 months of instruction. So let's suggest that 8th grade curriculum right now. We could be doing that work as we move into the new year. And there's also this notion of, what will school look like when we get back? What will school look like when we get back?
Are students going to be wearing masks? Or teachers going to be wearing masks? I mean, how do you juggle 25 students in a classroom when social distancing is implemented or suggested by CDC? And how is a teacher supposed to, you know, deal with the classroom and notify and oversee and make sure sickness, I guess, isn't the case? But I think you said something really key about educators and just us as people. I think parents, what I've seen from Facebook and strolling, and I'm not a parent, but I know parents are stressed and they're like, man, my kid's going to be behind, and they're not, you know, they're worried about the testing, standardized testing that they're going to miss. So they can't gauge. So we don't need to worry about standardized testing. Okay.
Bias was racist to begin with. So you couldn't say hallelujah. I mean, it's biased and it's racist to begin with. So let's just start there.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be the least of my worries if I'm a parent.
Yeah. So how do you think I mean, I know we're talking about, we're starting out for those of you who are tuning in, Dr. Dennis Carpenter, President, CEO of Aspirational Insights. We're talking about equity tonight, and just it's unfiltered. So we just going with the flow. And thank you all for tuning in on Up Next. And so so you touched on education, the education gap. So there's obviously parents need to own and just say, hey, I shouldn't be stressing right now. My kid is just going to be behind. And right now, what is the best thing a parent can do? So I'm not a teacher, but
Right.
I'm Corona schooling. I'm trying to do the Zoom call thing. I'm trying to work. What am I doing?
So make sure your child is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you're okay as well. You know, there's this whole notion before we went into the era of Corona, there was significant research coming out of Silicon Valley as it relates to the use of technology by students. Put another way, the experts were saying it's time to cut back. It's time to cut back on screen time. So much so that programmers in Silicon Valley, it was being reported that they were having nannies and babysitters sign contracts that when they went into their homes to take care of their children during times that the parents were away, they would not put them in front of a computer screen. And now all of a sudden, in the age of Corona, it's time to go back to the screen. So if it was an issue prior to Corona, then it's an issue now. So I would just monitor that amount of screen time. I would listen to my child, making sure that he or she is okay. I would just enjoy my child. You know, we do some afternoon walks and nighttime before bed, 5 rounds of bingo. Enjoy your child, man. And I'm serious, because Corona has taught us to take nothing for granted.
Yeah.
And the owning goes to us as educators when we resume this thing called school in the new normal. And we need to start owning that as we do the work of preparing for school in the age of Corona. How do we social distance in school? Does a mask become a part of a child's school supplies? How do we start making those preparations? How does the school make itself better and more equitable? Realizing that it can't look like just more things added. Sarah Graves, how you doing, dear? It can't just be more things added to the school supply list. You know, we've done that, and we started the school year with kids without supplies.
Yeah.
So let's start figuring that out. And I think my educator friends that I've been talking to, they're really, really kind of trying to figure that out. Those that have that clear equity lens. I can't help but think about Dr. Bedell and how he ratcheted things up in a hurry there in KC Mo. When I think about the equity talk that Lavelle Brown and I talked about in Ithaca, New York, and I got mine rolling, and he got some things rolling up in New York, man. So these guys know what's going on. They can get it. They got this. But I worry about folks who don't have an equity lens and who don't care about the children that are being left behind. And that also, Kiona, this opportunity to begin privatizing education. And there's some that are looking for a financial opportunity, because here's what that looks like. Parents, school can be a scary place now in the age of Corona.
Yeah.
Why don't you come over here and let your child do school with me for this price tag? And then you can further segregate children in that way and just increase this gap between the haves and have-nots. That's my greatest fear. So public education systems have to step their game up and be prepared for that post-Corona.
What should people be doing? Or it's a two-way question. Just people in leadership, you took note of Dr. Bedell was able to kind of pivot really quickly and adjust to some of the things that he's implemented. Wanted you to talk about that. And then two, people who don't have equity lens, who use the same notions of, you know, like when we knew that school was literally going to be out for the rest of the year now, it was like, hey, now kids are not eating, you know, kids that depend on school lunches, and just, it was this ripple effect. And so some people just don't care on school boards, principals, like just when you start talking about politics and people who are just doing it for just selfish gain and don't realize that really kids are not eating. Some kids are going to sleep without dinner and all these things. And it's bigger than just you running for school board?
So it's all equity, right? And it's all this ability to give each child what he or she needs in every opportunity. And it's also this responsibility that the basic civil right that's education should have, which is aligning every child's talent with his or her opportunity. And in those schools that are not doing that, we're at a time now where our children can't wait. And what I'm encouraging parents to do is just not bury their heads in the sand when they send their children back to school. When and if they make that decision, I might add. When and if they make the decision to send their child back to school, pay attention to your child's school. Because there are schools now that believe, since we rolled out some computers, since we've been sending home some assignments, since some percentage of children are turning those in, we figured out virtual school. And there's some people who are already saying, man, we don't have to worry about snow days anymore because we figured out virtual school already. And I'm going to submit, yes, you do. Because have you looked at your attendance percentages? Have you done any kind of demographic look at which students are turning things in and which students are not? Have you also looked at the quality of what's being turned in versus the quality when they stood before or when they sat before a teacher every single day? So you haven't done all of that work. You haven't done that analysis. You haven't done that study. So just because you roll a ball out on the basketball court doesn't mean that everybody's ready to be on The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I mean, it's real.
Yeah.
Rolled out some online instruction. Everybody's not MJ now. And we need to be very, very attuned to those children who are not and making certain that we do the right things when we see them. So it's 100.
Everybody in MJ.
No, and that's okay. They don't have to be. But don't start implementing a system that operates just because you laid something out. It's ready to go now. It's not ready to go. It's not ready to go for my children.
Do you think that this has exposed as well, last question pertaining to education, the counter or the combination between parent and teacher relationships dynamics as well? I haven't seen that, but I wanted to ask you that from an educator perspective, because we always put a lot of emphasis on parents have good relationships with your, kids' teachers, and then teachers, have good relationships with your your student's parent. But, now it's like, if I didn't have that relationship before to find out their needs, how do I know that now if I wasn't even talking to them before?
I don't know.
And vice versa.
I don't know that we've seen enough to note any change in that area. I think those parents who have the means, the time, and the access to make more connections with teachers, I think they're doing that. And I don't know that those parents who were not able to do that are doing it any better in the age of Corona. I also don't know that schools are making any more effort now in the age of Corona. Matter of fact, an argument could be made that maybe less effort is being made. Because all of us can fall victim to standing behind or sitting behind a screen and not doing all that we can do in terms of human interaction. So I definitely wouldn't say that this has strengthened that in any way.
Making a pivot, obviously we've seen some interesting things from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. And so it's, for me, I don't know, it's been pretty interesting because you start looking at, even just from like Kansas City, like the dynamics between our mayor and our governor, not being on the same page, but not wanting to be on the same page because it's a politics thing. And it's like, at this point, we're just trying to get tests. We're trying to save people's lives. We don't care about what 45.
Yeah. So
let's play a factor into we've seen our daily lives being impacted. How we vote is what we see now. So what do we do with that?
Wow. You mentioned the federal politics and the role that it's playing in local decision making, and you see this clear divide as it relates to Republican governors. They're more anxious to open. Democratic governors appear to be listening to the science. And it's unfortunate that we're in a position where someone said this morning, Corona is exposing the best and the worst of humanity. Corona is bringing out those folks that will write nice things on your lawn, that will send meals to your door, Corona is bringing out school district officials who will catch Corona to make meals for needy kids. That's the best of who we are. And it's also exposing the worst of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who would choose greed over human life.
Yeah.
Those of us who will make excuses for the words that come out of the mouth of our commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
It really perplexes me that the same people who can understand that Donald Trump did not mean injecting Lysol into your body when he made that statement, the same people that can understand that, and I listened to that statement,
mm-hmm.
they understand that that's not what Donald Trump meant. But they can't understand when Colin Kaepernick blatantly said, this is not about the military. It's about Black lives and the killing of unarmed Black men.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't understand that he said that and that's what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
When he explicitly stated it. And through my lens, Donald Trump explicitly asked the medical experts to look into disinfectants cleaning on the inside. But the same people who couldn't understand Cap, they understand that, oh no, that's not what he meant.
Yeah.
There's something going on here that I can't understand.
Yeah. And then yesterday, before my next question, I mean, clearly masks are being worn, by every American. If you go to the store, if you go outside, or if you go to the park, or if you walk the dog, or you're leaving your house. And we see the vice president just walk in the Mayo Clinic and there's no mask, and was told on record, they told him, hey, you need this mask. You're coming into the Mayo Clinic where plasma is given, people are sick. And his response was, I don't know, basically, in a great scheme of things of, hey, CDC said people should wear the mask for those who are sick, when we know that they say you need to act as if you have the virus. So that's for your protection, and for people who are essential workers, that's for their protection as well. What is that? What is that? Like, I don't understand. We have one person saying Lysol is great, and then we have somebody else saying that's a head of the task force, wear a mask, and then they're not wearing a mask. I don't get it.
So Pence is the head of the task force.
Sadly.
And we're told that in those roles, we're told that you have to model the behaviors you expect.
Yeah.
But we're walking amongst cancer patients, and whether the mask is protecting you or protecting them, it's protecting someone.
Mm-hmm.
And to make a political statement, I believe, my opinion, he's not wearing a mask. And it's interesting because 2 weeks ago, I went into one of my local supermarkets, and everyone was wearing a mask. Everyone up and down the aisles were practicing social distancing. The only place it got a little sketchy was on that back aisle where the meat department is. I'm out of here. I ain't going back there. But
catch you later.
Saturday, after all of these comments last week, I couldn't pick up a bag of coals without somebody on my neck. And I got my mask on, I got my gloves on, and I'm like, back up. So I guess the point is the narrative that's being spewed down from the top is influencing behaviors at the grassroots level and at the community level in a negative way, because we know that the social distancing has worked.
Yeah.
And we also know that a date was given for every community down the road, and we know that communities are breaking file, breaking rank before that date. And it's unfortunate. What
do you say to Tim Wise wrote a great article I sent you, I shared it with you, and I read some of it. Some of it was a little hot and heavy. Other parts of it, I was like, okay, I'm feeling you. Doing this while white people have more privilege to protest with 50 to 30 people around and nothing's happening, versus if that was a brown or black person of color, we probably would be on the news or have another killing. What do you say to people that says we need to open, we're losing money economically, I don't care about social distancing, but the science clearly states that we've seen a decrease a decrease in decline when we have done it, and we're trying to take measures in doing that, but they think elsewhere. They don't think so.
Yeah, we've seen privileged people equate quarantining to slavery.
Which is not the same.
Open up. I'm not a slave. Stop treating me like a slave.
Yeah.
And we're hearing this from a country that's built on the backs of slaves, right? And we're making this false equivalent or this false comparison. Here's what I'll say as it relates to the gun wielding, swastika holding, rebel flag holding, American flag holding. That's interesting. Rebel flag and American flag holding protesters. They get to protest in that way. Oh, and don't forget the AR-47s too. They get to do that. Meanwhile, Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, is gunned down by a white man and his son jogging through their neighborhood while black. Mm-hmm. And the last words we can hear on the recording that the 911 dispatcher said when they called 911 about this mysterious black guy in their neighborhood, the 911 dispatcher saying, "What is he doing? What is he doing wrong?" Mm-hmm. To which she never got an answer. Mm-hmm. And one of my fourth grade students, Chavis Johnson, was the mortician of record who buried Ahmaud Arbery. So do we get to now protest as people of color with AR-47s on the courthouse step in Glenn County, Georgia, without threat of armored vehicles and police officers? Or let's just think about Michael Ramos in Austin, Texas, just the other day. And let's think about Michael, hands in the air, telling about 10 officers with guns drawn, "I do not have a weapon." Now, did he walk to him fast enough, or did he stand with his hands up and argue? We can debate that all day, but it was nothing to be gunned down for. So can we go to the courthouse steps in Austin, Texas, with AR-47s and protests? I think we all know the answer, right? Yeah. So there's this double standard that just gets to the point where it sickens me to my stomach. Yeah. And it hurts me to my heart.
Yeah. It's a crazy time to be living right now. This is my first experience with global issues. Never seen anything like this in my lifetime before, so it's pretty interesting. You mentioned, I don't want to let you forget, inequities within essential employees.
Oh,
what are
yeah.
your thoughts on that?
So essential employees, I said to someone the other day, in the last 3 weeks when we were trying to save this economy, some of the same people who were called expendable months ago were deemed essential. And I'm not talking about the medical workers who are doing a phenomenal job of going in every day, braving life and death and trying to save lives. I'm talking about the little girl standing at the desk at Home Depot. I'm talking about the bank I went in the other day in Lee Summit, Missouri, that had all people of color working the bank. Now, the only thing that I'm going to say, to be fair, is that's not a bank that I normally frequent. I had to handle some out-of-town business. But here's what I will say. As a resident of Lee Summit, Missouri, I've never been in any place and everybody in there working was black. But on this particular day, when I went into this black bank, every employee was black. I thought I was back in Atlanta, Georgia. I was like, man, where am I? I know I'm in Kansas City. I can't be in the ATL. I don't know what that's about. Yeah. One girl told me she's getting more hours now than she's ever gotten. Wow. What's that all about? You tell me what it's all about. I'm going to isolate race and say race is on the table. It's always on the table.
People every single day, mailman or the delivery people, get your mail, get your medication, all those great things. And you go to the store, you pick up your food, grocery shopping, all those good things we really didn't pay too much attention to. But now it's really, really important.
Absolutely.
Really important.
Folks who are braving these situations. But when I think about the young lady who was on a television show I watched the other day from Alexandria, Louisiana, and she's a Dollar General employee, and she has no PPE. She has no paid sick leave. She's getting no additional dollars. And in her mind, as she stated, she has to go. Mm-hmm. And when she was pressed for a reason, she said to pay her bills. So we're still the United States. Mm-hmm. We're still the same country. And unless we open our eyes and an equity lens, we're going to be the same post-COVID.
Yeah. What do you say, Dr. Carpenter, about, obviously 4 years ago, we were under a much different administration in the United States of America. Now, fast forwarding where we are today, things look completely different. We look back on this 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. What do you say about that? And Americans or people in our community or all over the world who say, they compare the two. And when I say that, meaning, the current administration says, well, the past administration didn't prepare us for this crisis. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, not to get too deep in the political aspect of it, but what I will say that we've had some embarrassing commentary coming from the top of our country. Yeah. The voice of 45. Mm-hmm. And I will also say that there's clear video evidence and there's a clear record of votes in which the former president spoke about an impending airborne situation that could be catastrophic. Mm-hmm. And he was denied the votes in Congress to get some of the things that he needed. Mm-hmm. And the bigger issue, though, Kiona, in my mind, is how do you sit in the top of our country and you speak, and there's no sense of trust in the vast majority of American people, or some majority of American people. They can't trust what you say. And I'll just speak for myself. I never saw President Obama, 44, stand up and I not believe in what he said. Yeah. And I didn't believe at any time he was not speaking from a place of integrity. Yeah. And man, the lies and the mistruths, and one of the worst things you can do in crisis. Of course, I've never led through this type of crises, but I've led through some crises. Mm-hmm. And I would tell you the worst thing you can do is lose your integrity in terms of the facts associated with the issue. As difficult as it is to lay out the facts, as a leader, you must lay out the facts. Mm-hmm. You must lay out the facts. As difficult as that is, because once you lose that trust, it's gone. So now we're in a country where our head infectious disease person, Dr. Fauci, has more credibility with the majority of American people than our president. So we're going to lose stature in our world standing. Yeah. But November gives us an opportunity to look at things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of opportunity, I mean, are we going to take the opportunity? Are we going to embrace what we've seen and really think about that and not just be okay with receiving $1,200 stimulus checks to say, okay, everything's great. And, federal funding is, can just get allocated to governors that only side with the president of the United States? Or are we going to realize that, our votes really matter, and who we elect locally matters as well. And we see from a national standpoint, this stuff trickles down and it has impacted everybody's life. And we're been on a standstill now on how many days of quarantine? I don't know, 50, 52?
So here's what I'll say, Kiona, and you raise a good point. the young crowd, you millennials, y'all say no days off.
Yeah.
And as it relates to any day the polls are open in the area in which you reside in, there are no days off.
Mm.
So we talk about November and we postponed April, but if we have June for local election, it can't be a day off. November can't be a day off. Midterm elections can't be a day off. When it's time to look at the mayor of Kansas City and someone who will stand and speak truth to power, when that time rolls around again, and Mayor Q, it's his time again, no days off.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous when we take a day off. And we can talk about it from a financial standpoint, from an equity standpoint, but now it's literally a matter of life and death when you take days off. So there's a governor in the state of Georgia who, prior to becoming governor, was stripping every voting right he could from poor Black and brown and poor folks.
Mm-hmm.
He was stripping it in every way that he could. And now as governor, he was the last to close and the first to open up. And he pointed to those things that are so significant in the lives of people of color, for whatever reason. We can argue that at another time. Mm-hmm. But he pointed specifically to opening those things. So my question as a person born and raised in Georgia is, do you listen to the person as it relates to reopening? Who's the same person that tried to strip you of every voting right, tried to strip every voting right from a person of color he could? Mm. So it stands to reason he didn't want you to vote. He probably wants you dead too. Yeah. If you just want to keep it real. I think we saw a couple of questions coming in, and I don't know if I missed them or what, but I saw something coming in.
Yeah, we have a couple of comments. Someone stated, I would argue that local elections are more impactful to the Black community than most other elections.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another comment from someone was protesting while Wyatt has his privileges. Another one was, it is said that we are to expect justice and equity. Can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm. It is said that we are to expect justice.
Still getting, some are still coming in.
Yeah. Can't expect justice and equity. Can't have it both ways.
Yeah, people of color seem more likely to succumb to the virus too.
Yeah, to succumb to the virus. And we're seeing that, you know, I was looking at some data gearing up for talking to you, and man, I'm trying to really, really understand why. And it's pretty simple, but I just want to talk about the staggering numbers. Let's just start right here in Missouri.
Okay.
Where people of color or Black folks make up 12% of the population, but 44% of the coronavirus reported deaths. DC, 44% of the population, 75% of the coronavirus deaths. New York, 9% of the population, 19 to 20% of coronavirus deaths. Louisiana, 33% of the population, double that percentage, 66% of coronavirus deaths. Michigan, 14% of the population, the same place we can't get clean water. 46% of coronavirus deaths. Wisconsin, 7% of the population and 40% of coronavirus deaths. Black folks. South Carolina, 27%. You double that, 55% of coronavirus deaths. So when I think about this issue of what happens to us when we contract coronavirus, you have to look at this disparity in terms of medical factors and societal factors. So the medical factors, those pre-existing conditions. Why do we have so many pre-existing conditions?
Yeah.
You know, I spent some time over in Ghana, and I got into a conversation with one of my brothers in Ghana about the high blood pressure and the like. And he built on some information that I'd heard parts of before, but he gave me some compelling information about the boat ride through the Middle Passage to get to the Americas, and how we were just literally stuffed into the bottoms of ships. Yeah. And that as humans, our body had to have an adaptation to survive the journey, because we also know that the millions of us didn't survive the journeys.
Yeah.
And he told us that adaptation was the elevation of our blood pressure, because packed down in the bottom of the ship, you're losing so much in terms of hydration. All of your fluids, all of your salts, you're losing them. And the only way the body survived was to elevate its blood pressure. And that sticks with us today in terms of high blood pressure.
Yeah.
So the effects of slavery on coronavirus deaths, I would argue there's a correlation between the two.
Yeah. Someone made a comment and said, very good points. A lot of people fought, sweated, and cried so we can have the right to take no days off, keep fighting everyone, and follow the science, not the political rhetoric. So
there are these medical factors, and then there are these societal factors, going back as far as slavery, but also talking about access. You know, I had a show the other week, and one of my Canadian brothers, Scroggy, was on with me. And Scroggy talked about, as a Canadian, he never has to worry about not getting treatment when he's ill.
Yeah.
And he said, although the system has its flaws and its challenges, he never has to worry about not getting treated when he's ill. And he said the second thing he doesn't have to worry about is going bankrupt in the process.
Yeah, somebody just commented and said that so many factors contribute to this, because you got to be able to afford insurance, which is part of, I guess, some of the preconditions.
And the lack of universal.
Yeah.
So I think we've heard the conversations about universal health care. I think this pandemic should elevate those conversations again. Thank you, RN Lewis, for interjecting there. Lack of testing. And Lucas talked about, we don't have the level of testing.
Yeah.
We don't have the contact tracing that's needed to open up and the like. And when those things come, who do you think will get them first? So at the end of the day, it's still an equity issue. It's an equity issue.
My last, I guess, as we wrap up, because we talked about a little bit about local elections and nationally. I've been reading some stuff about how voting with the take-home ballots and absentee voting, a lot of different things now that certain voting locations are thinking about postponing, or I don't know. It's just a lot happening. What are your thoughts on that? We're basically saying, oh, like, we're not going to give people the opportunity to still vote. And that's not the case. Like, we need to figure out as a country, how do we continue to address and make accommodations so people can vote? And I've been learning and reading on that is somewhat of a mayor, governor. Some people need to make some decisions in order for those things to happen in our jurisdictions. So what are the thoughts, and what should we be preparing? And what is going on far as just like with other leaders in other states? And
so voting should be a fundamental right.
Yeah.
And what I'll say relative to voting is every citizen, every opportunity. Every citizen should get every opportunity to vote. We had some mail-in voting that went on over in Kansas, I believe, here since this pandemic started in a primary or caucus. And we saw those numbers just significantly increase in terms of mail-in voting. And that's what we should want. As a country that prides itself on being the best example of democracy in the world. But instead, they're going to be people fighting tooth and nail between now and November, and they're going to tell you everything that's bad about mail-in voting. Even though mail-in voting already exists in a more limited format. And I think just like we're smart enough to open up earlier than the science in a pandemic, then those same people should be smart enough to coming up with a system that includes mail-in voting, giving every citizen every opportunity. But it's the same dichotomy. The same people who understand that the Donald didn't mean inject yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to laugh, but
Kaepernick did not mean protest in the military.
Yeah, what I think about that.
What folks can understand when they want to understand it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Last question. I'm going to let you have some concluding thoughts as we end. How do we as a community continue to make our strides in creating equity? And when it comes to voting, what do we do in the meantime, or if we fail to vote again?
What I would say is, as a community, we just have to remain vigilant. Poor folks, people of color, people who care about poor folks, and people who care about people of color, they need to remain vigilant. Because this notion of a lower class or a middle class, it's under attack.
Yeah.
It is under attack. And so I've been looking at just opportunities for me to try to just do a little bit. And if everybody does a little bit, how can we all do a lot? So I, post-corona and even working from afar in partnership with my brother, really trying to figure out, even in my home community, more affordable housing. And how do you just make that little imprint where you can make it?
Yeah.
You know, daycare center, and how can you have more affordable daycare for children who need it most? They're saying that many daycare centers that are closing during this pandemic, they're not going to reopen. And the number of seats that was already insufficient is going to be even more insufficient. So how do we start putting our time, our energies, our resources where our mouth is? And so I've been trying to figure that out in the marginalized community that produced me, birthed me. And so just stay vigilant and do something in that space that you get the opportunity to impact.
Yeah, some people are going to go back and watch this video probably tonight or tomorrow morning. How can people get in contact with you, or where can they be directed to?
Yeah, so on Twitter, Aspirational LLC, and on Facebook, Aspirational Insights and Aspirational Insights Consulting LLC. If you put in Aspirational Insights Consulting LLC, you should be able to find me. I'm out there, and we were doing a lot of work. We were fortunate enough to be working with schools across the country, you know, prior to Corona, and doing some work with the Gates Foundation and Bill and Melinda Gates. And they were the first, about a week ahead of anyone else. They shut our work down. They shut it down as a World Health Organization. So what I'm going to state is that we're just out there trying to do good work for young people and communities, and encouraging everyone to make an imprint where they can.
Well, you brushed over that whole Ghana thing, but you were in Ghana making some strides there. That was pretty dope.
I want to have a shameless plug for Ghana. We were working on Murray Woodard and myself and Kokithia Hill, and working with my colleague John over in Ghana. And we were just trying to figure out this opportunity for individuals to go over and have an exchange of sorts over in Ghana. So we're still working on that project. It's going to get more steam, hopefully post-corona, if we can ever get back to some resemblance of normal. But man, there's just so much opportunity to go over and make an impact, but also be impacted. It was a trip unlike any other I've ever had, and I've been fortunate to go to a few different continents, but what an opportunity.
Man, well, we're grateful to have you in Kansas City, even though we know we are not going to be able to keep you. I'm grateful for you, and I learned so much from you, and it's just crazy that, you know, people just overlooked just the potential in what you had, but all good things sometimes come to an end for greater strides and greater impact. So,
oh man, we're having a blast.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on Up Next. For those of y'all who are tuning into this tonight, we have some other great things that are worth tuning into this week. Dr. Carpenter's information will be dropped in the comments. If you want to reach out to him, please do so. And you guys have a great night.
Yeah, Good Trouble coming back out at you next week too. Shameless plug, Good Trouble podcast.
Tune in, y'all. Good night.
Peace.